What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Bars Cars YouTube channel. Today we are working on my 2013 Silverado when we go over this Ultimate Half-Ton Ultimate GMT900 build. And today we're going to be talking about transmission upgrades. So this truck specifically, as you can see, we're in the middle of the motor swap. There will be a separate video up for that, what it takes for you to go through from a 5.3 or a 4.8 to 6.0, 6.2. But we're going to be talking today specifically about what can you do to keep your 6L80 alive. So everything that I'm going to be talking about here is going to be 6L80 specific. 6L90 basically is going to give you the same stuff here. Few variations, but for the most part, what I'm going to talk about is going to cover 6L80 and 6L90. So we're going to talk about the 3 things that you should do to keep your transmission alive, and an optional 4th one that I'm going to be doing to this one to help with the extra power we're going to be feeding it with this new engine. So let's get started. Alright, so quick tip here. Got the transfer case drain, got the engine drain, going to be draining the transmission here in a second, but how many of you out there have went to drain transmission, made a huge mess on the floor trying to loosen up the pan bolts and make a huge mess? So get yourself something like this if you think about it. So this is one of those like Mighty Vac fluid extractors. This one holds like 12-14 quarts of oil. They make smaller ones too, obviously some more affordable ones. This one is the air operated one, so you don't have to sit here and pump, but stick it down your dipstick tube on your transmission. Pull your dipstick out, stick it down the tube, and this will allow you to suck all the fluid out the dipstick tube and put it in the reservoir here, and then you will not be dropping the trans pan and making a giant mess on your floor. So just a little tip, try that out. A lot of the dealerships, as far as I know, like Volkswagen and some of these newer cars, they don't even drop the belly pans anymore and drain them. They suck the oil out like this. So while this tool is, you know, 200 bucks or something like that, I don't know exactly what they go for. I've had this one for a while, but while it's a few dollars, to me, not making a mess on the floor is going to be well worth it. So just a little quick tip for me. So right before I get this thing separated here and get it pulled off when we start working on it, let's talk about what am I doing to actually improve things. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is the inevitable torque converter failure in the 6L80, which usually is left go too long, and by the time you find it and you go to fix it, it's not a torque converter anymore, it's a full trans overhaul. So this truck specifically right now has 67,000 miles on it roughly, and it has been tuned since probably 37 or so. And so therefore what I'm going to be doing is not going to be a full rebuild on this transmission. I'm very confident in its health. So what I'm going to cover here is not going to be the full rebuild process, but if you have a lower mileage truck or something that has not been giving you issues yet, what you can do to try and extend the life of it or prevent that future failure. So I have a few things laid out over here that I'm going to talk about. But we're going to go over the first 3 things, and I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a tuning snip later in the video and show you what I'm talking about. But the reason number 1 why these torque converters fail, they are kind of a cheap converter. They could be a little better quality, but that's not necessarily the main reason that they fail. Main reason that they fail is tuning, and that's why I mentioned that this truck's been tuned for quite a while. In the GM programming, they target the torque converter to slip when it is locked. So what I'm referring to here is inside your torque converter is a bunch of fins and some stuff like that. There's a stator in it and stuff. And basically the fluid coupling in your torque converter, those fins spinning that fluid around, are what transmits your power from the engine into the transmission. So this is what gets you torque multiplication on start off, and then it goes into a coupling phase later on where it is not doing the torque multiplication. But on the newer transmissions like this, you have what we call a lockup clutch. The lockup clutch you can think of sort of like the clutch in your manual transmission, meaning that it locks the engine 1-to-1 directly to the input shaft of the transmission. it does not quite look the same. It's a wet clutch. It is a fluid piston apply inside the clutch that the valve body controls, but it does the same thing. You do not have that loose fluid coupling anymore. You have a direct one-to-one coupling between the flywheel or the flex blade on the transmission and the input shaft of the transmission. So the problem with that is GM's programming, rather than just applying the fluid pressure to that piston and making that clutch completely lock solid one-to-one, they made it slip. This was done for what the engineering will call NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness. I had this thing locked up, noticed zero difference in any of that. But that's what they claim, at least that I've heard what it was for. There may have been some other things as well, I'm sure. But that was one of the reasons, is to try and remove some of the vibrations from the engine by allowing a little bit of slip there. The problem is when you have a wet clutch like that, any clutch really, when you constantly slip that friction material, you do two things that are detrimental to the transmission. Number one is heat. So on longer periods of slip like that, you're going to generate more heat because you have that constant friction of that clutch material, that friction material slipping up against the steel plates in there. That generates heat. Heat kills automatic transmissions, okay? Thing number two is obviously wear. You can't continuously slip that clutch all the time and not expect it to wear out. So as it wears, you start getting that clutch material and you start getting the steel from the plates on either side of that lockup clutch also being dropped into the transmission fluid. So then you get clutch material and steel and stuff, and eventually you wear that clutch completely out, and then it starts to slip and you get the torque converter shudder that everyone talks about, where you feel that kind of shaking as it's trying to grab. When shudder occurs, it's because it's trying to get that clutch to lock up or grab, but it no longer has the ability to actually grab properly. It'll kind of grab and slip and grab and slip, and it has jolts, and that's that shudder that you feel in the truck. At that point, it's a done deal. You've already worn that clutch out, that converter is toast. So this one, having been tuned, what you can do is there's a table in HP Tuners, EFI Live, whatever you're using to tune this thing, that you can go in and adjust the torque converter slip table, and I'll show you that later in the video. But this thing has been set up for 0 converter slip as soon as I tuned it. So I took the converter slip completely out of it. If you want it to lock up more firmly, you can also adjust some pressures, oncoming, offgoing, stuff like that as well, to try and get it to grab more quickly, or more firmly, I should say. So that's thing number one, is if you want to extend the life of your 6L80, especially for these trucks that not only have 6L80s, but also have the lovely AFM DOD in your 5.3 or whatever engine is in your truck. Typically it's always a 5.3. Some of these 6.0s had it as well if you got a Vortec Max half ton. So 6-liter half ton only, it does not apply to your HD trucks. You can turn that off as well as fix the converter slip, and you have a pretty solid drivetrain then. So I'll cover the tuning portion a little bit later, and that's thing number one. So thing number two. So if you have allowed this thing to run for a while, you're always going to have some amount of clutch wear. So a good upgrade for you to do, if possible, is upgrade the torque converter. So what I have here is this unit. So I'll give you part number. So what this is this is a CTSV or ZL1 torque converter. So this is for a 6L90E. So 6L80, 6L90 converters are all the same. Doesn't matter which one it's for. So there's a reason that I chose this. You can see that this is actually a fairly heavy duty unit. You'll notice that this is actually set up for 6 bolts. I'm only going to be using 3 on this. This should be the same bolt circle as a truck. You can just use 3 of the 6 mounting pads, use the same torque converter bolts you have. So now you'll ask, why did I go to use this? There is 2 different part numbers for these converters. This one that I found and that I bought, I'm hoping that I'm right in saying this, but as far as I know, this part number here is actually for a brand new torque converter. I say that because there's no core charge on it. So this was actually much cheaper to buy, because if you buy the other one that is like 522 or 522 or something like, or 522 or 552, something like that is the last 3 digits. If you buy that one, you have a core charge, but you can't send a stock truck converter in for the core. They'll deny it. You'll have sent that converter in for nothing and you won't get your core charge back. So this one, at least when I bought it a little while ago, had no core charge, and it was actually overall much cheaper than buying the other one, because the other one was actually a reman, which I also trust buying a new one a little more than buying a reman. Might be a wash there, but made me feel better. So the reason that I bought this is, there's 2 reasons. It's supposed to be slightly looser than a stock truck torque converter, meaning that the stall RPM should be a few hundred RPM higher. 200 to 400 is what seems to be a commonly accepted number. So the camshaft in this engine that we're putting in is kind of running on the edge of what should be utilized with a stock converter. Texas Speed says they kind of recommend it but don't require it. So I know that I'm riding the edge of what I should be doing with this with a stock torque converter. So I'm hoping that this one being just slightly looser will work out without me having to go to a full-blown looser stall, something in the 3,000, 3,200 range. I personally don't like how they drive for the application that I'm using this truck for. So this truck, to me, is a daily drivable. I use it as a truck. I want to tow with it. I want to be able to haul with it. If you don't do that with your truck, then a loose converter is fine. But if you've ever tried towing a trailer with a super loose converter, it is horrible, and it's really hard on transmissions because you generate a lot of heat. So I'm trying to have something that is not super loose so that we don't generate heat and cause transmission damage. So that's reason number 1, is it should be slightly looser to help accommodate that camshaft without being very loose and having what in my opinion are some poor driving manners for this application. If it's in your muscle car, your Camaro, your Corvette, whatever, then that's fine. But for what I want out of this truck, it's not really what I'm looking for. So thing number 2 with this is this has dual lockup clutch discs. So this has twice the amount of material in it compared to the stock truck one. This one is a single lockup clutch disc. So therefore this one will hold a lot more power with the lockup clutch locked, meaning that I could basically go wide open throttle with this thing and keep the converter clutch locked and not worry about slipping it. So that's another thing that is beneficial when you're towing, especially if you're at highway speeds. These things tend to like to rev out trying to pull a load up a hill if I'm towing a trailer or something like that. So I can keep this thing locked, maybe not at full throttle, but I can keep it locked longer and feel safe about not damaging the converter, and also not generating a lot of heat that is hard on the transmission when the converter is unlocked and you're pulling with it for extended periods of time. So this one is overall a whole lot more heavy duty than a stock truck converter. This one is designed by GM to hold, you know, 550 or 600 foot-pounds or so, something like that, from that LSA supercharged engine that is feeding it in a 4,000 some pound car getting abused all the time. So this is a whole lot more durable converter than what they spec'd out for the trucks. So that is the reason that I'm doing that. Good, easy bolt in, not overly loose, still will have some good driving manners, but much more robust of a unit. So now that we talked about converter tuning and we talked about a converter upgrade, another thing that you can do is, if you don't want to use this, it's not uncommon for you to get a billet torque converter face installed on a stock style truck converter, keeping the single lockup clutch. The billet face is a more rigid material, so it keeps the surfaces flat for the clutch to ride against. So that is also a common upgrade if you want to go buy one of the big name FTI, Yank, Circle D, whatever, those guys. One of the aftermarket converters, they'll already have that if you wish to install a higher stall for a camshaft, if that's your application, what you're looking for. So basically, if you buy any aftermarket converter, it's already going to have all of the stock converter issues fixed. All right, so thing number 3 on my list, and what we are going to be installing here, is a bigger transmission cooler. So again, automatic transmissions create heat, but heat kills those transmissions. So therefore you want to try and keep your fluid temps down, especially again for my application. I'm going to be using this truck and working it. I want to have some more cooling. The cooler that GM uses on these is sufficient, but I would not say it is the best. So the stock cooler, I'll show you right over here, is not that big. This is the stock cooler. It mounts right up about here in the grill, and I will show you, compared to the one we're going to be installing, that it is significantly bigger, and that's going to help keep these temps under control. So what I have here is from Derail or Durali Performance, I don't know how you say it, but these guys sell this transmission cooler kit. Now when I pull this thing out of the box, you're probably going to immediately say, well, that's the True Cool 40K. Yeah, guess what? That transmission cooler is sold under a million different brand names now. Rather than buying a cheap Amazon, very questionable unit, this one was about, at least at the time that I bought it, about 20 bucks cheaper than the actual True Cool from getting it from Derail. So they call this a 13-row plate and fin transmission oil cooler. There is the part number right there. But this is basically, this is the True Cool 40K transmission cooler. And I'll go ahead and sit you down and get this thing pulled out, and we can see the difference in the cooler size compared to what we had on the stock one. So you can see that this thing is massive compared to the stock one. I'll just lay the stock one right on here for you. And basically we have 3 to maybe 4 times the cooling capacity as far as surface area goes with this bigger cooler versus the stock one. So again, having that slightly looser converter but also feeding it more power is going to generate more heat, and I definitely wanted to have a bigger cooler in order to keep the transmission temps happy. The rule of thumb that people tend to see is this one will keep it roughly 100 degrees above ambient. I have seen mine get to 115, 120 above ambient when you're working the truck hard, pulling a trailer and stuff. So I personally think that this lets it run far too hot, especially I'm in Florida, and it's not uncommon to you to see almost 100 degrees in the summertime, and I definitely don't want to see 200 plus degree transmission temperatures. So this is hopefully going to keep me down more happily in that, say, 170 or so area when towing, and cooler than that even when running empty. So I'll show you the install on that a little bit later, but that's thing number 3. So this is what I'm going to say is the 3 things that you should be doing to keep your 6L80 alive. Is a cooler, a converter upgrade is a very good idea, and tuning is also necessary. So I'm going to say that the converter is kind of on the recommended list. If your truck is fairly stock, if it doesn't have a ton of mileage on it, you can get it tuned and you probably will avoid converter failure. Or if you have been forced to do a transmission rebuild, obviously do the converter upgrade when the trans gets rebuilt and have the tune corrected so that you don't have that converter slip anymore, and it should live a long and happy life. All right, so one more thing. Thing number 4, what's the last thing you should do to your 6L80E to keep it alive? So I mentioned that we're going to be adding more power, so that's going to create more work for the transmission. So the last thing I'm going to be talking about here is this Transgo shift kit that we're going to be installing, or this valve body kit is kind of what they like to call it. So I give you a good video of the tag right there. So this is what they call their Tow and Pro kit. So this is the biggest, most complete kit, I guess you could call this, that Transgo offers. Sonax also offers a bunch of upgrades as far as regulator valves and springs and things like that. For the 6L80, they have a ton of goodies for it. The reason I went with this is, I'll just tell you, I'm not an automatic trans expert. I understand how they work as far as basics and stuff. But rather than having to remember to order a bunch of different items, I just ordered this. So this has pump regulators and a bunch of shims and adjustment. I'll kind of go through and try and show you the install process. Instructions are really good on it, so hopefully we don't have any hang-ups there. But I went ahead and bought this, and in order to do this kit, the transmission has to be out of the truck, because you're going to do some modifications not only to the valve body but also to the pump. So in order to modify the pump, you have to pull the transmission out, pull the converter out. So that's why I opted to pull everything the way I did. So right here I ordered a new O-ring for the pump, as well as a new torque converter seal, since we're putting a new converter in it and pulling all this apart. And they'll give you some instructions right here about how to do everything. So they give you a whole bunch of stuff in here to change as far as valves and springs and stuff like that. And we'll go through that. And the last thing that I'm going to be doing is I bought this drain plug kit that I'm going to be actually not putting in with the nut and the seal washers, but I'm actually going to be welding in, because the pan on these does not have a drain plug. So I'm going to be putting a drain plug in the trans so that I can drain it and not make a mess if I need to service it in the future. But this is the thing number 4 for me. Putting that kit in the transmission will help me put some more clamp force on the clutches, clean those shifts up, make it shift more quickly, more firmly, so that you apply those clutches and you don't let them slip. So that's the things that I'm going to be doing. This is very common if you get your transmission rebuilt, that they will do some valve body and pump upgrades. So we'll go ahead and show you the install on that. I'll probably just time lapse it, might talk on a few things as we go through it. But I got to get this transmission off and get set up. So that's your intro and the things you need to do to fix your 6L80. If you want to keep watching and watch me do all the installs, feel free. But that is the things that you should be doing to help save your transmission, prevent that future failure if you can. All right, so real quick, I know this looks a little bit odd and might not be the safest setup sitting here, but I actually had to jack the transmission up because I was about to flip it over and take the pan off of it, and I realized that there's probably still some residual in the pan. I did use the Mighty Vac and put it down through the dipstick tube hole and sucked a bunch of fluid out of this thing, but I only got probably 6, maybe 7 quarts out of it. And this thing holds a lot more than that, so I knew as it sat, as I was tearing more down, it would have drained more back. Unfortunately, I didn't remember that until I'd already disconnected it from the 5.3 over there. So rather than bolting it back up to the engine, I just opted to do this little setup here with jack stand and jack. But you can see there's still probably a good 2-3 quarts left in the pan there. I'm kind of letting this thing sit and drip and drain right now. I want to make as little mess as possible, because what I'm going to do is once this thing drips a little while longer, I will pop the filter out of it, let it finish draining the rest of the way, and I'll just drain the pan out, bolt the pan back up just for a minute with like 2 bolts so I can sit it back down, and we're going to stand it up on the tail shaft basically so I can pull the valve body and the pump out of it. Okay, trans update on this thing. So yanked out the torque converter. You got to do that quick. Most of that was actually some drippage off of when I dropped the pan. You've seen it up there. Do that quick, you make a whole lot less mess. You can see I only had a little bit in the bell housing there. So now I got the thing sitting up on the tail shaft where it's nice and easy to work with it. Got the filter out, and again, you can see there's like nothing in the bottom of this pan. It's super clean. There's minimal fuzz on the magnet. We're going to clean that up before we go back together. Like I said, I'll be drilling a hole and welding a bung in for a drain on this. So now that we're to this setup, we can start going through and doing what our instructions for this tow and pro kit tells us to do. So this is going to maintain some factory shift feel, light and medium throttle, but get progressively firmer, as well as reworking several of the clutch regulators and boost valves. And that's what we're going to start with. So the first thing we're going to work through here is it's going to have a start with the pump. So I'm going to go ahead and I will get the bell housing off. So the bell housing unbolts on this. You can see the bolts right there, and it pulls off, and the pump is on the back side of the bell housing. So I'll go ahead and get that off, and then we'll start going through this. All right, so something real quick here, something that I missed that I didn't really think about is I popped the valve body loose, got the pump out of it, but I forgot or didn't really realize, I guess, that there was a bunch of seals right here. So I'm gonna need to get those because I would rather not chance reusing them because they are 10-11 years old at this point. Not a ton of time on it mileage wise, as well as this center set of seals right here. So I'm gonna get a kit ordered for those, but before I make that order, I'm gonna keep working on what I'm doing right now and make sure that if there's anything else, I make the order all at once. It's only like 20 bucks for those seals, so it's not a huge deal. Just something that I forgot. Haven't been in a 6L80 before at all. Not much on automatic transmissions at all anyway, so it happens. So now that we got this out, I'm gonna start going through this. I'm gonna have to separate the pump assembly off of the bell housing in order to do this, because as you can see, you need to be able to stare at the vane side, or the, I don't know what you would call it, the fluid side of the pump, not the back side here. So I'm gonna get this assembled as it shows so that it's ready, and then I'm gonna get this separated. We'll get it taken apart so that we can start swapping out the valves. Alrighty, so pulled all of the little 8mm bolts out of right here that was holding that together. Down inside your pump assembly, you can see the pump and the vanes right there. Everything looks really good in here. I've seen a lot on the people that do rebuilds on these. When these things go out and they wind up pulling trash through, they wind up scarring up this pump face. So this one has no scarring that you can really feel. You can see the machine marks. There's very slight wear, but there's nothing that you can really feel, so we're in good shape there. I went ahead and assembled this part of the valve how they show you. So check ball in first, then the spring, then the cotter pin. So I got that assembled, and I got the other pieces out here, the red spring, the seat, and the new pressure regulator. So this is going to be new regulator, new boost valve. This is going to allow the pump to generate a little bit more pressure to apply the clutches a little bit more firmly, just to keep everything happy. So now I'm going to double check myself here on everything before I jump into this, and I'm going to start taking this apart. Okay, so I'm sure the guys that build these transmissions are probably gonna laugh at me, but I was looking and I'm like, man, how do I get that pin out of there? Because I thought it was a roll pin that was like tapped in, because I'm looking on the back side here and there's no hole to tap it out. I'm like, well, what the heck? So I just pushed on it and the pin fell out. So apparently that just floats in there, and I didn't realize that the bell housing here actually keeps that from falling out. So pretty easy. Anyway, got the old valve out as far as the pressure regulator and the boost valve, old spring. So now we're going to put the new pieces in right here. So I got my new pieces and I got a little bit of clean ATF. I'm just gonna, my hands are pretty clean here. I made sure I washed off before I started doing anything over here. When you're inside transmission, dirt is not your friend. So clean hands, clean workspace. I know the bench looks a little gross, but I got some cardboard laid out and stuff that's pretty clean. I try to make sure that I'm not stirring up any dust and stuff like that. So I'm going to lubricate this up, and we'll go ahead and start putting the new pieces in and get that together, and we'll move on from the pump onto the next step. Alright, so near as I can tell, I got everything installed. So pressure regulator in first, then the new spring seat facing correct direction on there. Reuse the little center bumper spring. That guy is in there, as you can see, kind of hard to. New red spring, and then we got our boost valve assembly installed. Got the cotter pin right here bent over so it holds everything together. So I think we're good to go. It's pretty simple actually now once I do it. This is a really easy install. Oh, make sure your pin doesn't try to fall out of there. So I'm going to take a look here. I think this is it for the pump. This talks about some different seal rings, but mine has the new style, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to take a look at that and I'll get back with you. Okay, so I thought I read this correctly, but I did. So I have a steel stator with non-rotating rings. So you can see here that these have the little lock tabs that keep them from moving right there. So our rings do not fit a stator with locking notches. We use the original rings, so no need to touch anything there. We're good to go. I don't need this set to replace those stator rings, so we're good to go with that. I believe that's it for the pump. The rest of this changeover is in the valve body. So now I can just put the pump back on the bell housing, and we're done with the pump assembly. I can actually put it back in the transmission, and then we'll deal with the valve body. I'm going to wind up putting the valve body back in when it's in the truck, because I'm going to wait for those seals, but I don't want to wait to get this bolted to the new engine and get it back in the truck. But fortunately, this valve body is actually incredibly easy to pull off. There's only 6 bolts. So those little goofy looking E-Torx, but they're not quite an E-Torx. They're kind of squared off more than an E-Torx. But an E-Torx will fit it. Only 6 of those guys bolted up to the case, and then just make sure you get your seals in there. So I'm going to wait until my seal kit arrives, and then before I go to put fluid in it, I'll put the valve body back in, put the new filter on and all that stuff. It'll just have to be in the truck. But I can bolt the pan up for right now and at least keep the dirt out while I install it. Alright, so I just had an epiphany moment and realized that I don't have the pump alignment tool for this. That was something that I had looked into a while back but never ordered. So do what I do at your own risk here at this point. So you have one dowel pin up here, but this pump can still move, and you're supposed to get this all aligned for bushing, input shaft alignment, your stator seal alignment, all that stuff needs to be right, or this is going to have leakage problems, bushing wear, stuff like that. So I sat here and I pondered for a while, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to go about this. You can get it fairly close with just using this bolt and this bolt. Actually are drilled a little bit smaller than the others, so there's a little less play in them, but obviously that still is not good. So I sat here staring at this, trying to figure out, well, I don't really want to wait for the tool because I would like to get this thing back in there. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? I sat here with like a razor blade and kept pushing on this and trying to feel for it and use the razor blade to see if it was straight, which I'm fairly confident I probably could have got it straight with that. But then I had this little epiphany. Take yourself a 1/4 inch socket, and there's a little ledge right here and a ledge right here. Well, those just so happen that they'll keep it nice and square against the pump. So take this thing and just push it all around. So I'm gonna set it over, push it out toward me, and take this and just simply take this and just slide it like that all the way around here, and that will center it up. Because basically this is going to keep it perpendicular 90 degrees, and the socket's going to ride up against this edge all the way around. So just take that and push on it, and voila, no centering tool needed. Just like that. So I'm going to sit here and play with this and get it to where I don't see it moving anymore, and then I'll tighten it down and I'll do a quick old finger check with it. And the razor blade just sort of as a verification, but I'm actually very confident because all you're doing with that band clamp thing is you're literally just clamping these two together so that they can't move really. And I'll double check this again after I tighten it down, but there should be enough room that it doesn't move. I know that's kind of what the band's for, is also so when you tighten the bolts it doesn't move. But it seems like this is at least working for the initial lineup, so I'll let you know how it goes. Alright, so I'm not going to tell you to do this, but I think it works. Gives you the same results, and you probably got some of these laying around. So, I'm calling that a new cheat method, however you want to put this, to center up that pump. So now that whole thing is assembled, I'm going to change this filter seal real quick and change the torque converter seal while I have this up on the bench. Get that all changed out and do a quick little cleanup of this, and I'll put this back onto the transmission. So I realized that I probably should have tried to knock the seal out before I put the pump on, but then I also realized that it didn't matter anyway. This is like the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I'm sorry if I'm nerding out on this because I've never done a whole lot of trans work or 6L80s, but GM was, in my opinion, smart on this and put a snap ring holding the seal in there, and it's like a hand installable rubber press seal. It comes in and out super easy, so you're not worrying about actually damaging that, having to try and drive it in with a driver or find a socket or something like that. You literally can get this little guy kind of hooked up in under the lip there and just grab it and pop, pull it right out. And the new one, I literally just pressed it in, put a little bit of ATF on the outer part of the rubber that seals into the bell housing, and just pop, put it right in, and then you just snap the snap ring back in. Why can't we make all seals like that? That's so easy. They won't do that because then they don't have to sell seal installers, but you know, that's, come on. Okay, so I got that seal put in, got the snap ring put in, I got the new O-ring right here on the bell housing. Did a quick wipe up of the, actually I got a little bit over here still, but did a quick wipe up on the transmission. Do a quick wipe up again on the bell housing, make sure it's all clean and clear. And we're gonna stick that back on there and start on the valve body. Okay, quick update. So I got the valve body over here. I got the TECM, TECM, whatever you want to call it, the control module with the solenoids off of the valve body. I think I got all the bolts out of here, so I'm going to try and separate this thing in just a second. But I got everything separated out. Bolts are coming from the bottom, the bolts that hold the TECM or the TECM, whatever you call it on here. And then the ones that come through the backside are a little bit shorter. It looks like they're a little bit different lengths, so they're all kind of over on this side here. So I'm gonna try and get these separated apart. I did some reading. Sorry about that. Did some reading ahead of time, and it looks like the upper should have all of the check valves in it, I hope, from what I can see here, to make sure that they go back in the right place. So I don't think I got to worry too much about that on the lower, so that's why I've left it like this, where the upper is going to be sitting down, so hopefully all the little check balls, the BBs, stay in the valve body when I pull this off. Fingers crossed. Appears that that assumption was correct. I don't see any check balls up here that I've dropped out or missed. Separator plate looks like it's in really good shape. I don't think I'm gonna have to worry about replacing that. I just had one little bit of transfer right there on that bolt corner, but that's not going to affect sealing or anything, so I should be able to reuse this. All the check valves, or the check balls, stayed in place in the valve body there. So we look like we're good to go on that aspect. So now that I have this disassembled and I can get in here, I'm going to start going through and swapping each of these valves. I'll stop periodically and give you a quick update on that. So we're going to start with step one and get that solenoid regulator valve that it's showing you up here. We'll start with going through and getting that changed up with whatever we need to. So new bushing, new valve, white spring, spacer, and a gold retainer. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so I found what I was looking for on the valve body. So this right here is this guy right here. Pull the retainer out, pull the spring out, and pull the valve. And now I will install this bag of parts, which is the bushing, a new valve, a white spring, the spacer, and a gold clip or retainer right there. So we'll go ahead and put that in and put it back together. So we got that down in here. The bushing goes in, and the way I understand the bushing is because this pressure regulating valve tends to start to wear the bore out in this. Mine still fit really tight. I did kind of lean it up. I didn't really see any wear in there. The bushing still fit pretty tight. I didn't have to tap it in, but it fit nice and snug. No movement there. Put the regulator in, put the white spring in, and then the little sleeve that keeps the bushing from moving. Got that put in, and then got my gold retainer in. So that's thing number one done. So step one is done. Then we're gonna have to do some more stuff here. So I have a bunch of these little aluminum plugs and O-rings. Looks like I have to go through and change. So assembling all 4 clutch regulator valves, replace all the end plugs with the new end plugs and O-rings, leave the O-rings for installing, and 2 remaining plugs will be used on step 4 in the lower part of the valve body. So it looks like on the valve right here, it doesn't look like I changed anything. It looks like I just have to change that plug right there. So we'll go ahead and start going through that. And step 3 will be, looks like this guy right here. I got to change out a spring in the 456 boost. Okay, so I got the little retainer out for right here, and slid the plug out. So now I'll get one of the O-ring ones done up, pop that back in, pop the retainer back on. We're done with that. And then on to the next step, which will be that boost spring for the 456 clutch pack. So trying to move right along here, we got the 2.6 clutch regulator changed out, along with that little billets piston stopper deal there, the seal at the end, sorry. And I have the retainer out right here for that 3.5R boost, and I got the blue spring right here. So you pop that in there, and now I'm gonna have to put it down because I need 2 hands to be able to push that in, and then you just drop the retainer clip down in there. We'll be moving right along. We just got a couple more things to change and we're done with the upper part of the valve body. Then we'll move to the lower part. This has actually been a pretty easy install. Transgo's instructions are very clear if you got a little bit of mechanical knowledge and you don't dump all the BBs out of it. This is actually a pretty simple process. Alrighty, so bottom valve body's done. Nothing real special here. I just had to knock these 2 retainers out, put the 2 aluminum plugs in here, and that was the last changes for the lower valve body. So upper valve body here, lower valve body there, sorry, flip-flop that. Lower valve body, I got a few things here to change. So we got to put the new torque converter clutch regulator in there, and then we have to change both of these shift valves and put the little aluminum plugs in there, sorry, excuse me. And per what this is telling me here, I have this newer style separator plate, and off that separator plate I need to use these black shift springs that they say, because you can see that I have, looks to me, I call it like a key slot. I have the little key slot right here, and it shows that one here, and if you have that, you need to use the new black shift springs in with these selector valves when you put them in. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll wrap up this valve body, put it back together, and that'll be your Transgo install. So pretty quick and easy, actually. Okay, so I got the lockout, and in that order. So your retainer, the aluminum spacer, this little spacer right here, and then you'll have your lockup clutch valve and the spring. Per the instructions, pitch these, so we're not going to use those anymore. We're going to have this guy right here, so the new white spring, so you can see the white paint on that, and this is going to go in there. So I'll try and show you popping that guy in real quick. And you reuse the spacers and the retainer, you just change the valve, and again, white spring, you can see the white paint on that guy right there. So that will kind of sit in the end of the valve like so, and we will slip all that up in there. I'll put a little bit of ATF on it, so I got clean ATF in my little cup, my lid of my ATF jug here, so put a little bit of fluid on that so it slides in nice and easy. You want to have everything lubricated up like the rest of the valves, and I'm going to slide that up in there. So that's in. You reuse your gray spacer, drop that in. Put your aluminum spacer back in like so, and then you simply reinsert your clip. So I'm gonna squeeze that in with my finger, and you can get that started. Push that right down in there. There you go. So the lockup clutch for the torque converter, got the new valve in for that. The last thing will be these shift select valves. Now that I'm a little quicker and a little bit better at being able to show you this, I'll try to go through and actually show you putting a couple of them in. That one trying to pop out. So we'll come over on this side so you can see, and we're going to be looking in these two right here. Oop, scratch up my separator plate. Scratch that. We'll have some leaks. That won't be good. So I got these two shift valves right here, and just simply pull both of those out, change them out for these, change the springs out. So what I've been doing here is I got this little, it seems to me like this 45-degree pick is the one that's working the easiest for me anyway. Some people may have something different, but I kind of get it up in here and push that up, and sometimes you can grab the edge right there. Oh, that one come all the way right out. Okay, so got the retainer out, and now what I'm doing here is gently, because you don't want to scratch the valve nor the valve body, but just kind of, I'm taking the rounded side and sort of just using it to push the valve out. So if I get down in here, I can see that valve, and I can just kind of push on that just a little bit and try and get that baby to move. This one's hanging on me a little bit, that aluminum. There we go. So I got the aluminum spacer at the end, the seal to pop out. So now I can just simply go in here and just gently walk that out. You want to try and keep this end up just a little bit. They should slide real easy. You just give them a touch, a little bit of help in there. All right, so we're back. A pair of these really fine tip needle nose will help you. You can grab a hold of the tip of that, and it just needed just a little bit of help slide out of there. It slides nice and free, but they get just a little bit of wear and some stuff on them, a little bit of like material in there, and they wind up catching an edge. So that one's out. Now we'll lubricate our new one up, pull it out of the bag here, and we'll slide it in. Make sure that you find your right orientation. So this wants it to go in with the large flat spot. Needs to go in there. I'm sure they're replacing these because these ones feel like they're aluminum. I'm sure they wear, whereas these are a steel. So it probably keeps them from hanging up and causing poor shifting, I would guess, is probably what they're trying to do with that. So throw this one away, get some ATF, try and put some good lubrication on all these contact points, lube them up, and slide it in. Right in here. So pop that in. New black spring. New black spring right in there. And then put in one of these new aluminum seal blocks at the end. A little bit of fresh ATF on the seal, on the O-ring, so you don't cut it. Be gentle kind of pushing these in. It should slide in nice and easy, but you might have to make sure you don't cut them when you pop them in there. So that one slid in there nice and easy. Pop your retainer back in. And there's one. And then I'll get the second one changed, and we should be done with the valve body. So I'll try to work this thing on up out of there. Slide gently. It doesn't take much pressure. It's taking a lot of pressure, probably having problems. And if you don't have your thumb in there, this one might just shoot out at you. So take that out of there. I'll try the pliers on this one. That worked a whole lot. There you go. This one slides real nice and easy. So there you go, old valve. And the last aluminum plug. I do like the Transgo seems to give you a couple of spare O-rings in case you cut them. Putting one in, that's nice. They give you a couple backups. Put a little dip of some ATF on there. Lubricate that up. And pop. Put that right in there. Retainer. And away you go. So there you go. Valve body complete. Just have to get that torqued up and put together, and then we will be ready to install this back in. So I'll torque it up, put it together. I will try to show you real quick. I did buy the new pressure switch kit for the valve body, but I'm going to work on putting this together first, and then we'll move over to the TECM deal over there when it comes to doing that. I'm going to double check and make sure there's nothing else in here that I need to do before I put it back together, but I think we're done. Alrighty, so something else I'm going to do real quick here before we put the pan back on is, so I'll give you a part number here, G1380 from Summit. This thing was only a few bucks for this drain plug kit. So you got a couple options here. They send you these little Teflon washer things, and basically it's a no weld style, but I'm going to wind up welding it because those will eventually wind up leaking. So what I'm going to do is drill my hole, and I'm actually going to trim this off so that it basically is flush with the pan. I don't really want anything sticking out, but I'm going to wind up putting it right about there. There's feet on the filter, and they sit kind of here, and here. So I want to make sure that I don't go anywhere near where the feet would be, because then the filter might wind up getting a little cockeyed and sucking air. So I'm going to put it right about there. Really doesn't matter a whole lot of where you put it because you're just trying to drain the fluid. So I'm going to go right in this area. I'm going to start drilling some holes, and then I will clean this thing up and weld it on there. Okay, so real quick, went ahead and poked my hole. 1/2-inch hole fits perfect for this. It actually snaps in pretty tight, stays in there. Went ahead and wire wheeled it up a little bit so that I got any of the coating off of the pan and off of this nut. And you can see that I cut the excess off. Now obviously if you were putting it in with the nut and you weren't welding it, don't do that because you won't have anything to hold it in there. So basically I'm just using this for that little 1/8-inch pipe hole, so I have something to weld in there. So I got it set up like so, and it sits basically just flush in here. So I'm going to weld it inside and out just to make sure that I don't have any leaks, and we'll be good to go. Alright, so pan's back on. I got this thing laying down. I'm going to get the new converter out. I'll get some fluid put in it. Always make sure you pre-fill your converters. Should take a quart, maybe 2, but at least get some fluid in it before you put it back on there. I'm going to give this thing a quick cleanup too, and then I'm going to start on the other video. I'll be working on getting the engine swapped over, get the trans put on it, and all that stuff. So let's get the converter put in. Alright, so I got it pre-filled there. I was going to wind up making a mess. I did get almost a quart in it, but this already did have some fluid in it. When GM ships it, they put that nice orange cap in it. So I'm sure it's got some fluid in it from testing or whatever before they ship them out. So, but I did get about a quart of fluid in it. Make sure you take this thing and shake it, kind of jiggle it around, tilt it all around to try and get fluid down into the converter, because otherwise it just wants to fill up to here and you might get a couple burps out of it. Alright, so my bad, I thought I had the time lapse on, but apparently I didn't. But I got the converter in. So when you put these in, you should feel 3 clunks, like the first one as it's sliding in, and then you're going to spin this thing as you're pushing on it. So it's a good idea to kind of have 2 hands doing this. One picking up on this snout right here a little bit, just to help support it, because otherwise it wants to lay at an angle kind of down like this. And you pick up on that and take the other hand and kind of grab these lugs and spin it, and you should feel it clunk, clunk, and then a final one as it locks into the pump drive. So the first one is kind of as it slides up on, then you feel it kind of hit the input shaft, and that's your second one. Like your first one is kind of as you go in, you'll feel it stop. When you spin it, that second clunk as it goes over the input shaft. And the third one is when it locks into the pump. So it'll have to lock kind of the pump and the stator. Everything will have to get locked in there. So just kind of keep pushing on it again as you support it. You can see that this thing's inset pretty far, so I know that I'm all the way in. If it still seems like it's really close to the bell housing, stop and double check it before you try and mate the engine together. Another thing you can do if you're questioning if you got it all the way in is just come over to your engine and sort of take an eyeball or grab a tape measure or something and see how much distance you have from the edge of the flex plate here to the block where it mates to the bell housing on the trans. And you can kind of use that as a reference point to see if it is set back in far enough, so when you go to mate them together, you'll know that it's actually setting far enough back. When you go to put the converter bolts in, it should actually pull the torque converter forward out of the trans just a little bit, you know, 1/8 of an inch, maybe a quarter, something like that. it should have a little bit of room to float in there. So if it's touching as soon as you go to put it together, you probably didn't get that thing seated all the way, so don't force it. Okay, carrying on with all the transmission upgrades, we have to get the cooler mounted. So I showed you all earlier that I just kind of got it plumbed up, but now we need to worry about the mounting part of it. So I still have a little bit of tweaking on these lines to do down here. But what I've done is they sell quick connect adapters, and I'll find the part number on them here for you. They're a Dorman fitting, and this is the card out of it. So 800-605, it's a transmission fitting adapter, and what that does is takes you from the flare fitting that is in the transcooler to the stock size quick disconnects. Now, I did not cut or do anything to this line as far that could cause another leak. All I had to do was just bend it. So while I had the engine out, I was doing everything. This line right here that you have to bend connects up to the cooler right in this area. So I just pulled the whole line out, and generally this 90 is turned this way because the cooler fittings are much more close together on the stock cooler, and this one's obviously much wider, much bigger. So I did some twisting and some bending, and I just rebent this line so that it kind of makes the bend over that way rather than coming to this side. So that's pretty good. I got a couple little tweaks on it left still to do, but you can use the stock cooler lines on this without any other modifications. So on to mounting the cooler. I don't have it from them, but in hindsight I kind of wish I would have bought it. There's several places out there that make a bracket for this cooler, and in hindsight, after I just spent $25 I think it was on this little piece of aluminum, I wish I'd have probably just bought one of theirs, because now I'm gonna have to make this, but oh well. So what I've done here to make this fit is I have done some trimming. So this bottom bar right here, you can see where I have cut. This is like an L bracket where the grill mount and the hood latch goes. So in order to make this fit, I've done some trimming, and yes, I'm dry fitting this right now. I will blow a little bit of black paint on this because I've obviously just cut that, and that's bare steel. So you need to get that cut basically where you're left with a flat piece and not an L bracket. What I'm going to wind up doing is, if I slide this thing over just a little bit, there is the bolt holes in this cooler actually line up with some of the pre-drilled factory holes, so I don't have to drill anything there. And then what I'm going to do is take that piece of aluminum, and we're going to measure and cut it to fit, and it's going to lay in right like so. And what we're going to do is I'm going to use the pre-existing holes right here and the holes in the cooler. So I'm just going to have to cut this down to the length of the cooler tabs basically, and clean it up a little bit, drill a few holes here, here, and here, and then the cooler will be all mounted up. Like I said, just a couple minor tweaks on the cooler line still, but that will finish up the cooler install. It's a very simple process. So this is what you wind up with. Trimming off, sorry, I had some coolant, some water spillage when I was topping this thing off and trying to get it burped, so there's a little bit of mess under here, but that's what you wind up trimming off, is about this much off of each side on that L bracket. And it'll stiffen up since you have the cooler and the hood bracket mounted back up to it. It does get a little bit flimsy when you trim that. A couple minutes later, a little bit of cutting, a little bit of trimming, a little bit of sanding, a little bit of drilling, and we got ourselves a bracket. So I tried to make sure that this intruded the least amount on airflow through the cooling stack. So that's why I kind of trimmed these ears off and stuff. I would have cut out in here, but we really only would have been gaining, the way this is I'd have gained, I might have been able to slip a finger in there, which really won't amount to much. This bar ends basically right at the edge of this core, so it's not really going to block the transcooler flow or anything, so it's going to be what it's going to be there. I don't really think we're going to lose much as far as airflow through the cooling stack with that. So we got it trimmed up, got it a couple holes drilled, and I think I'm actually going to paint that black, the bracket anyway. So I don't like a big shiny silver bar in there. So I'm probably going to grab a little bit of rattle can and blow some black paint on that, as well as touch up these spots where I trimmed out with the to fit the cooler. So quick coat of black rattle can, just some engine paint, and I think that looks a whole lot better. Now I basically only painted the outside here. I did put just a very light dusting on the front of the core, but I didn't put hardly any paint here. I painted the outside so it wasn't shiny and in your face, and obviously I painted my bracket, and it's a pretty light coat. I still got a couple of thin spots, but anyway, I didn't like all that shiny aluminum in the grill. I'd like it to blend in just a little bit more. So I put just a tiny bit on the front here, but it's definitely nothing that's going to inhibit the cooling. I didn't just sit there and blow a bunch of paint in there and fill the fins up, because I'm sure somebody's going to say, oh well, the cooler's not going to cool now because it's got paint in it. No, in the core it really doesn't. It's just a little bit here on the front. But anyway, so that's in. Oh, gotta slide this fitting up. I managed to tweak the lines just a little bit, and I got that one back in the lock. I had to do just a slight twist on this one because that line actually kind of comes out like this. So I had to make it go a little bit more toward the passenger side of the truck. So wanted to give you an update on the transmission side of things with this. So when we did the engine, we also did transmission upgrades. Want to say that shift kit install was successful. Everything worked out well. Thing runs, shifts great. I got a little bit of tuning that I'm going to tweak on. One thing I will say is the first thing I noticed is make sure you do your relearn, because I had this thing set to shift pretty firmly already. So then when I put the kit in, it was not quite knocking your teeth out, but it was a little bit rough. It took a little bit of time to learn. The other thing is I'm going to go over a little bit of some tuning stuff, but on the transmission side. But this torque converter, it's definitely looser. Now I know I'm going to get people saying, hey, you changed the engine too, so you don't have a good reference. I'm aware of that. But compared to the stock converter in the 6L80 with the 5.3, this is definitely significantly looser. It stalls, I say, a good 400 or 500 RPM higher. It drives looser. It's not to the point where it's annoying to me like a higher stall, you know, like a 3200 stall or something would be in something like this. I don't like a slippy converter in certain applications. Okay, this truck, not one of them. It's loose enough that it works really good with this camshaft. So if you have a mild cam or something that's kind of riding the edge of needing a converter, this would be a decent upgrade if you don't want to go to that point of buying an aftermarket one from one of the big name guys. The one thing I will say though is this ZL1 converter wanted more lockup pressure and tightening up on the all that stuff as far as how fast it applies. I don't know if, I'm sure that has to do with it being a dual disc or whatever, but I did have to do some significant adjustments to me with getting it to lock up well. Maybe that was just because of how tight the other converter was, that it didn't have to work as hard to actually lock the clutch up. But I did have to put a bunch more apply pressure on it to get it to actually feel like it was locking and not kind of just like slowly pulling the RPMs down to that lockup speed. So I did have to do a bunch of work on that. Like I said, I'll film some stuff as far as what I did with my tables to get it shifting how I want. So the most important thing that you need to see here in HP tuners is the highlighted tables that I have here for you for the desired torque converter clutch slip. So you're going to go into the trans section, go into the torque converter and the general tab, and you're going to go into all the ones that have the slip in them with AC on or AC off, and you want to zero all those. I have seen some calibrations that have upwards of 200 RPM, 250 RPM of commanded slip. And as I said before, that's basically like if you would be in a manual transmission, you'd be like towing the clutch and letting the clutch slip all the time. That is one of the biggest things that kills these transmissions, is that lockup clutch slip. If you command that to 0, then you should be not having that slip happening all the time and not generating all of the heat that comes with that and the clutch lining damage to your torque converter. Now the next thing that you're going to want to go in and do some adjusting, and this is sort of the apply ramp or the pressure ramp that I was talking about on the converter, is you're going to want to open up the apply ramp and you're going to go in here and sort of adjust some of these pressures, and this is going to tell you or basically adjust how firm the converter locks up, meaning how quickly does that clutch apply. When you get into that apply ramp, this is what a factory calibration out of this truck looked like as far as what the apply ramp is, and you can see that it's a very long gradual ramp and it doesn't put a lot of pressure on the lockup clutch, so it locks very, very softly. I would even say that it doesn't even try to really lock up. And this is also going to be a contributor to that converter slip and that clutch lining wear. So what I would encourage you to do is to adjust that pressure up and basically shorten the ramp. Now the shorter you make this and the more pressure that you put on it, the firmer the lockup is going to be. So you will want to tune and adjust this to your preferences. It may take you several tries to get it where you're happy with it. This is where I have mine set currently. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what the factory calibration was. So you can see that my ramp is a lot sharper, and even under the low RPM, you know, the smaller cells of slip, you can see that I still have some pressure on the clutch, and that is to keep it from basically trying to almost unlock and allow slip and then relock. That can be kind of annoying when you're driving it, where it feels like it's locking and unlocking when you have throttle position changes. So this tends to keep it where it's grabbing all the time, and you don't have that kind of annoying surging feeling with the original file. Other updates as far as the transmission cooler. It's tucked back in there. I did blow just a tiny bit of black paint on it so it kind of blends in there, but you can still see it. I got to get this top panel put back on still. I've left it off, but dropped my trans temp significantly. I would say about 40 degrees across the board is a good number. Running around town, it runs in the 130s, 140s, even when it's 80 something, 90 something degrees. So runs much cooler. Have not really got to tow with it, but before it would easily run 160, 180 degrees, just normal around town driving in this kind of weather. So it does run much cooler. Pretty happy with that. So just figured to give you an update, sort of finish out the transmission side of this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Hope this helps you save your 6L80 or 6L90 from disaster striking, and we can prevent them from, you know, all of the transmission rebuilds that cost you all thousands of dollars. A few $100 up front and a little bit of your time should significantly help save your transmission and your pocketbook. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. We'll see you in the next video.